So welcome. My name's Andrew Corbett-Jones. I'd like you to welcome Alex van Someren. He's flown in over the weekend from the UK. He's from Cambridge, works in London a little bit as well. What I thought we might do is find out a bit more about Alex and also why he's here, and then we can maybe move into some Q&A after that.
So for my sins, I was the kid they couldn't get rid of at Acorn during the days before the BBC Micro, and I ended up working on the BBC Micro, so I got my name burned in later versions of the ROM. So for those of you too young to understand, the BBC Micro was a British government initiative to improve the level of education about PCs in the UK at the time, and schools in Britain all got a choice of several kinds of computers, of which the BBC Micro was particularly predominant because it had the BBC, the broadcaster, behind it, and so it had a national TV series that went with it. And to be fair, it was also a pretty stonking high-performance machine at a good price point at the time. And Acorn, conveniently, was in my hometown in Cambridge, and I was sort of rude enough to barge my way in as a 14-year-old, and after that they couldn't get rid of me. I ended up leaving school and going to work there at 17, and I spent a couple of years there. And over the course of the rest of my life, having realised I was unemployable, I went on and did various things of my own. But Acorn turns out to be an important part of my story, as we will see again in a minute.
And you're jumping ahead too far. So I had the pleasure a couple of years ago to actually work with Alex for 2 years. And the story's deeper than that, isn't it? So as I understand it, you went to Acorn Computers, said, hello, I'd like to do some stuff, and they gave you a job.
So I saw an ad for Acorn in the electronics magazine I was reading. I wrote a little letter, as only children can do, you know, dear Acorn, please can I have a job? Signed Alex, aged 12 3/4. And to their great credit, the founders actually wrote back to me and basically sort of said, well, there, Sonny, you're a bit young, but why don't you drop by sometime during the holidays, and we'll see if we can find you something to do. So the first day of the holidays, I was on the doorstep, and they were somewhat surprised to find that I'd taken them quite so seriously. And one of the co-founders, Herman Hauser, basically realised that I wasn't going to leave unless he actually gave me something. So he handed me a computer, the predecessor of the BBC Micro, something called the Acorn Atom. And he said, here, take this, why don't you see what you can do? So I tucked it under my arm and I got on the bus and I went back home. And I showed my little brother, who was pretty impressed that I'd got a free computer, and we sat and translated a Star Trek old shoot-'em-up game, sort of teleprinter game from the Commodore 64, which is another machine of the era, and moved across the BBC Micro. And the following day I got on the bus with my little cassette tape, which that's how it worked in those days, and went back into Acorn and showed them, and they all stopped doing any work and they started playing Star Trek, and after a while they realised I was still there, and they said, well, yeah, you can come back. So after that I was there every day. And eventually I realised that actually I could probably get a job. I flunked all my A-levels, which is not what you're supposed to do. I gave up my school exams and I just waited for the end of school. And once school finished, I went off and worked at Acorn in customer service, which is an experience I would recommend to any aspiring entrepreneur, by the way, to be on the end of the telephone lines, dealing with customers, living the front line and learning what it's like when the documentation isn't quite good enough, or people really need help. It's actually quite good for the soul, I think. So anyway, that went well, and I survived a couple of years, and after that I flounced off to London, where, as I'm sure you know, the streets are paved with gold.
Is it true that you sold the rights to the computer game for a whopping 16K of memory?
It is in fact true. That Acorn said, well, how can we pay you? No, but you're only 14. We can't actually employ you at the time. So they paid us in bits and bobs. So yes, it was memory chips here and expansion cards there and so forth. That's the kind of thing that computer geeks like.
So the next thing, you build a company called nCipher.
Well, there was a little bit of evolution along the way. So we progressively evolved our work in the Acorn computer pond, which was a very small pond in which we eventually became reasonably large fish, and eventually we discovered that actually there was a bigger, wider world out there. So in the mid-90s, there was this interesting new piece of software called Mosaic, a web browser, and some of you will be familiar with the concept. At the time, it was fairly novel. My brother, bless him, ported the Mosaic web browser onto Acorn machines. Being a true software engineer, he decided that the other guy's code wasn't really good enough. As you may be aware, we're talking about Mark Andreessen's code, so there's reasonable grounds for believing that actually the code was okay. But anyway, Nico re-implemented the web browser himself, and that web browser became a product which we sold in the Acorn industry. And one of the features that we added to it, and actually a very important tip of the hat here, courtesy of some Australian hackers, there was a public open source implementation of the very important SSL protocol, the thing which I hope you know gives rise to the little padlock icon that allows you to have secure connections from your web browser to, for example, financial services sites. And SSL was designed to be asymmetric in its computational cost. So it was easy for the client, the web browser, to do the work, but hard for the server to do the work. And its cryptography depended on that asymmetry. That meant that e-commerce websites that were successful, connecting a lot of customers was actually a very, very hard problem for e-commerce websites to keep up with the pace at which new customers were connecting. And so we had a flash of inspiration that when we met some venture capitalists one day, my brother sat at dinner in Boston one evening next to a guy who eventually gave him a card and said, "I'm a venture capitalist. If you ever need any money, give me a call." My brother came back to the UK and said, Alex, I found the guys with the money. What shall we do? And I said, well, we should take it. So we basically came up with a plan. We came up with literally like a one-page business plan which said, we will make a piece of hardware that will make the encryption used by SSL go faster so that more people can connect to websites more quickly. And the venture capitalists, basically didn't understand anything much about it, but they thought that sounded like a good idea. And we were lucky enough to pull off a £1 million investment from these VCs. Now, how long have I got? Can I tell as much of the story as I want?
Yeah, go for it.
So, very good entrepreneurial experience story here. We met effectively as what I would now call a super angel investor. So the so-called venture capitalists were actually, if you like, the family office of a successful entrepreneur. A guy, Wales's most successful entrepreneur, a guy called Terry Matthews, who made networking products at a business called Newbridge Networks. And he was redispensing some of his cash, circulating it back around again by investing in funky startups. So these guys offered us £1 million for 33% of our business, which I think, frankly, for a business which was literally a kind of one-page business plan, and, some smart guys who probably could do what they said, but no product, no MVP, a paper proposal, I think that's a good deal. And, personally, I'd probably to this day encourage you to take £1 million for 33% if you're at the one-page business plan stage. However, Newbridge Networks, his company, had slightly different ideas, and the long and short of it was that after accepting and shaking his hand, mysteriously nothing happened for months and months. We couldn't quite get the money to actually show up. And it eventually became clear that Newbridge Networks, his company, wanted a slice as well. And various justifications and excuses were produced for this. And they basically said, well, we want another third of your business, and we're going to give you benefits. We're going to give you partnership. We're going to give you by now understood that it's basically a load of fluffy nonsense.
Typical VC deal, yeah?
So, it's the value add, I think we call it nowadays. As you can probably also imagine then, I felt that giving away 66% of my company, was troubling on several levels. First of all, it wasn't the deal that I'd originally thought I'd signed up for. Second of all, 66% of your company is a lot to give away at the beginning. So I grumped around. I went on holiday with my wife and small children to Norfolk, where it proceeded to rain for a week, and we had a miserable time in a cottage. Eventually, I came home in the car with my wife, and I turned to my wife and I said, I'm going to make them give me my money. And then I phoned up and capitulated, and I took the deal. Because in the end, £1 million for a paper idea is still £1 million. And one of the important things to get done is actually taking the money and getting on with the job. And, we didn't have 100 different VCs to go see. We weren't shopping this deal around. We weren't doing all the sophisticated things that you would probably do now to make sure you got the best deal. We were chancers, and somebody really would give us £1 million for 66% of our business. Well, hell, why not give it a try? So we did the deal. I spent several years trying to ensure that I got as much value as possible for the second 33% of my business. I didn't care that I lost control of my business on paper at the outset, because you haven't lost control as long as you maintain a good relationship with your investors. There's no reason why you should ever have a vote in your board meeting which is based on the number of shares that people hold, unless somebody in the room is an arse. So actually, as long as that's not me, and I've able to keep the other people on the right side of the line, it doesn't have to be an issue, and it never was an issue. The reason you're hearing this story is because it all went fine. We gave away 66% of our business, but we also probably worked twice as hard for the next 4 years to try and grow that business, and we were doing something that genuinely was needed. We were making a product that actually solved a problem people really had. And so 4 years later, from nothing, I had one of the biggest IPOs on the London Stock Exchange in 2000, just before the bubble burst. And the valuation is madness. We had, by this stage of business, had £15 million in annual revenues. So that was cool. We basically doubled every year from nothing, kind of 0 to 4, 8, 15. But it listed at a £375 million market cap, and I raised £110 million in cash in that IPO. And so, I feel it was kind of fine, right? With the, losing control of my company and so forth stuff, because actually we were able to get a great result. Now, your mileage may vary. I can't promise you that you can have this outcome, but you can see that, I'm entitled to feel that the deal that I chose to do was probably okay. And anyway, then of course there was a slight adjustment in the market in 2000. But the good thing about having £110 million is that, well, you've got £110 million. So we simply didn't do the thing that everybody else did. We didn't spend the money on overpriced TAT. We just waited. We made the business profitable. Everything got cheaper. There was a thing called the 98% Club. Some of you may remember this. That's the companies who lost 98% of their value when the market corrected. And I eventually did 4 acquisitions with nCipher using the interest on £110 million, and then I still had £110 million. And eventually, we gave the money back because we couldn't use it. We actually didn't need it. Now, remember, this is a niche cryptography business. I wasn't going to be able to build a unicorn out of something that made SSL go faster. I might have had greater aspirations, I suppose, but actually there just came a point where we said, we don't really need to blow this money on overpriced TAT, even several years later. So in the end, we returned all £110 million to our shareholders, which, speaking as a shareholder, I was really okay with. And so ultimately, we had a very successful journey. We had a fantastic time building a product that did something really valuable, and we got great value for it as a result. We made a lot of people happy, and we serviced a lot of great customers. So,
you're now working with Amadeus Capital Partners, apart from other things that you do, and Herman Hauser, who you did work with in Acorn.
Who's there in the picture?
He's there in the picture.
So this was the...
You're there in the picture as well. And I love this picture because...
I'm the one who's doing the work.
Well, everyone's staring at their screens. To me, this is a typical British office meeting. The room is far too small. No one's paying any attention, and it looks boring as, doesn't it?
In this staged photograph, I'm afraid you're not getting a very true sample of VC life.
It's not staged.
So what happens is, my first boss, Herman Hauser, very kindly offered me the opportunity to become a VC and to kind of switch to the other side of the table and to invest money in other people's businesses. And by this stage, I built 4 businesses over the journey. We've kind of skipped a few steps out. 2 of them in the end, in fact, went public. And I've, collected a lot of knocks and bruises. And so I feel I've got something to offer from an entrepreneur's point of view as an investor. So Herman is 4th along with his head just popping over the right-hand laptop. Herman, by this stage, had become very successful. Acorn had gone well for him. He'd made a number of other great investments. And he was co-founding a venture capital firm in 1997, so not long after I started nCipher, called Amadeus Capital Partners. And in 2010, a couple of years after I sold nCipher and worked for a little while with Andrew for the British government, I joined as an investment partner at Amadeus. And what I do is I invest in exclusively in high IP technology, business to business, enterprise technology, in the UK only at the moment. So no consumer stuff, no fluffy social networks or shoe shopping.
And have you ever flung someone £1 million for a piece of paper?
Well, let me see. That's a very reasonable question, actually. I actually probably haven't flung anybody £1 million, but I have, I've written some checks to 2 kids with an idea. Yeah, not quite as large as that yet.
Not your kids?
Maybe later. No, that's not legal.
Recently, when I say recently, a couple of years ago or so, you co-founded Cyber London. So what's Cyber London?
So one of the things I invest in, because what I used to do is now fashionably called cybersecurity, one of the things I invest in is cybersecurity. And it became clear to a lot of people, I guess, that in the UK we had quite a lot of potential for developing innovation in cybersecurity, but actually there wasn't any good focus point. So I don't need to explain to people who are sitting in a fintech accelerator, what the whole purpose of the exercise is. Cyber London is a cybersecurity accelerator, and we, had some good fortune. A wealthy hedge fund guy who's an investor in the funds that I manage foolishly said to me one day, "Alex, I've got 4,000 square feet of spare office space. Can you think of anything cool to do with it?" And I said, "Well, funnily enough, I think we need a cybersecurity accelerator." And he said, "Sounds great. I've got all these boring maths nerds downstairs. I want something exciting going on the 4th floor." So I said, "Okay, I can do that." And so then we taxed a few large defence primes, Raytheon and BAE, to sponsor said program. And it's a traditional accelerator, so it gives some cash and 12 weeks of curriculum to applicant startups who are doing things in cyber, and we put them through the process. We introduce them to lots of customers, investors, potential partners, people who've been entrepreneurs, etc. And then they come out of the other end, and we try to make them even more successful during the process, and we take them to a demo day and show them off to everybody, and I'm sure you all know the model. So this is an experiment which has gone better than expected. We've had now 23 companies go through the program over the last 18 months, and BAE's become the main sponsor. We have a fairly close relationship with the British government, so we try to get the government's security and intelligence agencies involved, try and get academic institutions involved, get large banks. There's a lot of fintech in London, of course, so we get customers involved, and we just mix it all up and see if we can help people to go faster and be more successful. And it's highly compatible with my day job. I have to have clean hands, so there's no funny deals between me and these startups, but they get a bit of cash to see them through the program, and then at the end I'm allowed to write a term sheet just like anybody else if I get excited.
So cybersecurity is well, everyone's talking about it at the moment. It's this year's FinTech year. So PwC released a report recently. I've sliced up some of their infographic. Detected security incidents have increased 109% in Australia, and maybe it means that actually they're detecting them better. Security budgets are increasing, so it's a good place to be in. For those who happen to read this sort of thing, ASIC's corporate plan for the next financial year, it's interesting that their second challenge in that lengthy tome is digital disruption and cyber resilience.
And you've got a national cybersecurity strategy as well.
We do. I noticed that the White House recently appointed a security person as well. So tell us, why are you in Australia? What have you been doing today? What are some of the things that you're seeing in cybersecurity? What is it that we don't know? Hands up if you're working in cybersecurity or related field. Straight up. So I can see them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they're pretty good smattering here. We might ask what they're doing in a second. That could be interesting.
Good plan.
So why are you here in Australia?
So it's got nothing to do with the fact that it's a great place to visit, that the weather's excellent, the food's better, and I got to go kite surfing on the Gold Coast. It's all about coming to SciNet 61, a 2-day conference that has been going on at the ATP. It's a place to bring people who are all of the above that we just discussed, government, academics, entrepreneurs, investors, customers, together and try to make the pace of innovation in cybersecurity and the commercialization of cybersecurity go faster, and try and improve the quality of people's security online very generally, which is a cause I think we all have an interest in. Whether you feel you work in cybersecurity or not, we all care about it. We're all impacted by it. And Cylon potentially could come over here and deliver a similar kind of project over here, and people are making positive noises at me about trying to make that happen, which is super. And I basically, I like coming to visit, so I said yes first. And I've just been, running a panel this afternoon on similar kinds of innovation clusters all over the world. So we had a lady from DOD, in America, a couple of local reps, including some of your friends and competitors, and some of your local residents, and also myself flying the flag for Cylon. So we're just trying to basically link up all these centres all over the world where people are doing innovation in cyber, and try to ensure that they give benefit to each other. And I think many places have similar challenges that you have in Australia. The local market in the UK isn't large enough necessarily to build global businesses on its own, so you have to expand elsewhere. So you have to think about, where would I go, where are the customers going to be, how will I finance that, when is the right time to do that, and trying to get help and advice on that is good. The criticality of securing your first big customer is probably the thing which determines most of all. I've learned a lot actually these 2 days about the kind of particular characteristics of Australia as a market origin. There's quite a lot of talk about Internet of Things security because of the nature of some of the economic background to Australia. I was at CSIRO. I looked at some great data visualization stuff, and I'm obviously I get a benefit as an investor as for my day job just knowing a bit more about what's going on locally. So.
The Internet of Things, it could prove quite exciting, but I've got to say I have an elderly moment the other day where we have a company in Melbourne called LifeX, which manufactures light bulbs that you can control with your phone and change colour and et cetera, et cetera. And I thought they're wireless, so I thought that's fantastic. They're very cheap, they're half price at the moment, they're a great company globally. Then I thought, the last thing in the world I want to do when I get home is work out why my light globes haven't connected to the Wi-Fi because we had some blackout. I'm not interested. I want them hardwired.
And so that's before somebody hacks your light bulbs.
Yep. So Internet of Things might leave me behind. I want to talk to people who are in cybersecurity. Graham, just 5 seconds. What are you doing? Well done, mate.
Sorry. So it's called bunkvaultonline.com. It's a little device. What this does is connects to a supercomputer. We build virtual machines at other random addresses on the internet. We do it in about 2 seconds, so it's a pristine machine every time, and that becomes your endpoint device.
Super.
So you're securing banking, so we can use a virtual terminal. That way, whether our machine's infected or not, doesn't matter. We're able to do our banking securely. James, did you put your hand up for cybersecurity?
Yes.
Please tell us what you do.
I work in a financial organisation, so I do risk assessments and security gap analysis.
A big organisation? A big banking organisation? Which one? I know there's only 4. Well, there's not only 4. You think there's only 4. Who else? Sam? Michael?
I'm Michael Hogan. I'm an information security consultant, but also the Chief Information Security Officer for SAM's company, Casada. I've been in the industry quite a fair bit of time, so specializing in a whole bunch of things, especially protocols and crypto.
So Casado is solving the issue around passwords, is that a fair? One of the things, yeah. It's much more complicated than that. Who else had their hand up for... You can't sit on your hands. Are you sitting on your hands? You sure? Who else? Chris, did you have your hand up? No. Over here. Mr. Manassian.
My name is Carlo Minassian. I'm starting, this is my second venture, and the first one I sold to Dimension Data 3 years ago. This one I am specializing in detecting and responding to advanced threats that bypass perimeter controls. A lot of companies today get lots of alerts, and like the target and all the other attack threats and attacks that happen, breaches that happen, they had all the tools, but they were getting too many alerts, so it's called alert fatigue. So I'm trying to fix that problem, to give them the things that actually matter.
Interesting. So Alex, what are you seeing globally? Because you have a global perspective in cybersecurity. Where are the problems? Where is the interesting place to be if you're thinking about providing a solution?
So the security market is incredibly fragmented. One of the challenges is that it's constantly evolving, and within that there are literally hundreds of different subsectors, which mean that the things that are hot one week, are literally different the following week. I think there are a number of areas which most investors are keen to try and find solutions for. The one we were just hearing about, so doing analytics on network traffic, looking at behavior within the alerts domain, trying to sift out which are the critical indicators using automation rather than just using humans is super, super important, because the challenge of the volume of alerts and the number of transactions on networks, exploding at a rate which is clearly inconceivable for people to be able to cope with. So any amount of that kind of automation, usually involving machine learning to try and train systems on what alerts are important and what aren't, is definitely a hot area. So I'm pleased to hear that the gentleman's doing something in that domain. I'm quite interested in behavioral analytics, so what users are doing. The biggest risk threat vector, now that the perimeter is no longer securable, is about people clicking on attachments, as you probably know. And the problem is that we can say, don't click on the attachments, and people will still click on the attachments. And so the challenge there is to try and actually, it's very kind of non-technical really in a way, is an educational challenge. It's just persuading everybody to take more seriously that they shouldn't click on attachments.
But that should work.
Well, so actually I've met a couple of really interesting businesses which do gamification of phishing. So they're literally, you pit employees against each other and compose messages to try and spoof other employees. And because you know something about the person on the other end, you can craft something which stands a much higher chance of fooling them. And then, points win prizes. You get people to try this out on each other. Everybody in an organization, from the lowliest receptionist to the CEO, can participate in this. And actually, it's a really, really interesting educational exercise, because everybody is equally prone to these kinds of challenges, and it's actually very, very good fun. So, that's a nice example of a kind of non-obvious technology, but actually doing something really, really important in user behavior.
You said something a couple of minutes ago, the perimeter is no longer securable. So to the layperson, what do you mean? Okay, so it used to be that we tried to build a security model which said, we're inside our organization, and the organization has a physical perimeter and it has an electronic network perimeter, and there's a gateway to the internet, and we'll try and throttle what comes through that gateway. And everybody on the outside are bad guys, and everybody on the inside are good guys. And that model has become completely untenable, and it is now, I think, universally accepted that you will be breached. It isn't a question of whether or not you're going to keep the bad guys out. You will be breached, and you will have bad guys in your network. And therefore, the question is, how can you mitigate the risks when you know you do have bad guys in your network? Obviously, you'd like to have fewer bad guys penetrating your network, so it is worth training people not to click on phishing emails. But there are also other things you can do on the inside of the network about mitigating the risks, accepting that you will have bad guys on the inside. So, for example, data loss prevention, DLP, and data classification, so products which search the network and actually figure out where are the documents you'd rather not lose, where are the documents that turn out to have passwords in Microsoft Word files, where are the 27 copies of the document which says confidential, do not copy in the footer, and can we round them all up and can we make them more secure? Those kinds of things where we can reduce the impact of having bad guys on the network, they're super, super valuable, because they're all about accepting that there is no secure perimeter any longer. It's a little bit depressing.
Well, it's just different. You can't afford to be depressed, you just have to go with it.
Over the last cohorts coming through Cylon, what's been some really interesting tech that you've seen? What's really struck you?
So we get a great diverse mix. I mean, we really do get two kids with the back of a fag packet who come along and say, they've solved some really, severe problem in network protocol or, event analysis.
We have a group that advises the Treasurer in Australia, and they're called the FinTech Advisory Group, which is also FAG.
Okay, so thanks for that, Jim. It's like asking me to choose between my children, so I'm not going to do it, right? I think they're all interesting. We managed to get a reasonably wide range to choose from, so we get about a 10-to-1 ratio of applicants to people that we select, and so that means we can afford to pick and choose things that we think are likely to be high profile. We've got a great business in the most recent cohort called Check Recipient, which does what it says on the tin. So it's a plugin for the Microsoft email infrastructure, which looks at who you're sending emails to, and it says, no, wait a minute, you didn't mean to send those M&A documents to Andrew Corbett-Jones. Don't do that. And are you really sure that you want to send your email to? And it sounds kind of ridiculous, but we've all done it, right? Everybody, I'm sure, has sent an email to the wrong person at some point or other. If you're in M&A and investment bank, it can be relatively serious, and it's pretty embarrassing, even if you're doing something more prosaic. So the idea that it just puts up an annoying dialogue only when, very low false positive rate, only when you really do something weird, and then it goes, are you really sure that you meant to do that? And the chances are, if it puts the dialogue up, you'll be wrong. You didn't mean to send it to him. And needless to say, it uses fashionable machine learning to analyze everybody's email traffic all of the time and figure out who are the people you probably didn't intend to send emails to. I think that's great. I think that's about helping users to be more careful with their daily business whilst completely not intruding. You wouldn't even know it was there 99.995% of the time. And that's a sort of tidy example of the interaction with the human, which in security turns out to be most of the problem.
A few weeks ago, we held a census in Australia, which we do every 5 years, and I don't know if you've caught up with this or not, but
I am aware that you had a bit of an upset.
So do you have any, has it been discussed in the UK or today's conference, and any observations on that?
To be honest, the UK has enough colossal government IT fuck-ups of its own.
Really?
Yeah, really. You're fine. We're not gonna fret too much about yours. I mean, we blow billions on new IT systems and then decide that they, aren't required or change our minds later on about what we want them to do. So, but because I do this for a living, I did notice that you'd had a little upset, and it was being discussed. Everyone was slightly embarrassed about it at the conference.
Should we be embarrassed or not?
Well, I understand from somebody in PMC that a full drains up audit is being carried out on how this could possibly have happened, but really what was going on is not really a security thing at all. It's more of a kind of SLA thing. It was just actually kind of a victim of its own success, and everybody was actually doing it just in the intended fashion. That sounds like a great problem. Look, I mean, stuff.
But given your interest in behavioural psychology, is there likely to be an effect in the minds of the population?
Oh, totally. And that part is a disaster. The idea that it's undermined trust in the government's ability to deliver successful infrastructure is a disaster. I don't dispute that for a second. But we've had those back in the UK too, and whether it's at one end of the spectrum, you have the employee of some government department who leaves a memory stick on a train and it's got thousands of files in it that we'd really rather not have leaked, right through to a website melts because it's got too many people trying to use it because the infrastructure wasn't robust enough. That we've had this with the it's called the DVLA, so the vehicle licensing tax discs for cars. We switched away from having paper tax discs, we switched to having fully online, and sure enough, the whole thing melted. It's just part of the joy of building successful contact with real users at scale. But I don't think that anyone should expect perfection in any such large-scale deployment, and especially where you're trying to deliver a high secure service to a large number of users. That's really, really hard to do. And I mean, governments aren't very IT savvy, it turns out, so they need help, and that's hopefully what some of us are here for, right?
Are there areas that Australia is strong in? I mean, we're good at picking niches and doing quite well of those. Are you seeing any niches I mean, you've only been here 5 minutes, I.
Well, I'm being sold to on the idea that the artifacts of so geography, things like looking at the security of Internet of Things, because there's a lot of autonomous vehicles, for example, potentially necessitated in the future. Mining equipment that's driving itself, therefore needing to be kept secured. I think that's actually a very viable proposition. I think that you absolutely have differently structured economic activity from many other nations, therefore you will be good at different things. I think that kind of follows logically. I think the fact that you've always had to operate from here, addressing markets elsewhere and sort of thinking about exports. I mentioned that I think you're not alone in doing that, but the Israeli model, I like to call it, they kind of have the engineering there, but except that in their case America is where they're really trying to get to. That model can work very well, and it seems like it's a kind of thematic part of how businesses are often built here, because the local market isn't going to be large enough to be satisfying to build a business of scale. So I think if you are used to that and you have systems in place to help you do that effectively, that's super, because that means that you're already making the right assumptions about how hard it will be to grow your business and what you have to do to make that successful. And I think there's a sort of sometimes a disorder amongst entrepreneurs that they believe that they can operate on home turf and it'll be good enough to be a really big fish in the really small pond. And generally I would say that's not how to build a business of scale. And I guess nowadays we all kind of want to be global successes, so you need to think in a different way, and I think the impression I get is that you very much have that mindset.
I'm going to ask for some questions from you guys in a second. One last question from me before I do that. Today, did you hear anything particularly interesting, particularly that made you sit up and think, that's good, that's interesting, that's new, that's well done? I'll just give, first of all, credit to the fact that we managed to go a day and a half before we had a panel that was all white middle-aged men. So there was a perceptibly better gender diversity than there is in the UK. It's really as simple as that. And that was great. And I'm fighting for women in code, and I'm fighting for my daughter to be treated with respect in society. So the idea that I didn't have to say, sorry, I'm not going on that panel because it's all men, was really nice. And seriously, and in the UK, that is a huge problem. So huzzah for that. I saw on Twitter there were bald men too.
There are a few of those. So anyway, it's really funny actually, because then this morning, finally, there are 4 guys on this panel, and they spent 10 minutes apologising because they were all really embarrassed. So that was, great. I'm deadly serious about that. I think that's great to see. We can't afford to leave half the population out. This is too big a problem. So, good stuff. I think there's a lot of will to find solutions to improve the quality of cybersecurity in the nation's interactions amongst themselves and with the outside world. That's great. Bizarrely, cybersecurity is a space in which government actually does have quite a lot to contribute, because government agencies have a lot of experience, and it's not often, having been rude about government IT projects a few minutes ago, I actually think that cybersecurity is very interesting in the sense that there is intellectual property inside government that can come out and actually help solve problems in the commercial world, and it isn't all that often that you think of government as a potential source of innovation. But I genuinely think that is the case in cybersecurity, so I think that's a good thing. I'm not answering a question, but kind of deliberately. I think the thing that worried me is that I heard a lot of people say Australians won't buy Australian security products. They'll always go overseas first. There's a kind of somewhere between lack of confidence in what you are originating here and a kind of cover your ass potential that says if it's a brand name from America, then it's safer to buy that, and we'll do that first instead.
IBM ran our census.
So, and the good news is they embarrass themselves, right? So maybe you'll think again about that in the future. Whereas actually, I put it to you that the way real innovation is done nowadays is not by big, stodgy global brands, it's by spunky startups, and that's why we're here. And so actually, the sooner everybody is willing to embrace those risks, the better. Interestingly, today we had a panel of banks say no, they hadn't bought anything from any local startups. Like, those were the 4 guys, and they all sat there in a row going, no, no, no. None of them had bought security products from indigenous startups, which is pretty shocking. And on the other hand, yesterday, we had a panel of entrepreneurs who'd built security businesses, all of whom had, bought from, invested, used, so merged, partnered with local companies that had done things, so high risk in innovation. So that was great to hear. So, in a shock development, banks are slightly more conservative than other businesses. Well, I guess we knew that. But I think it's, I think that's, you clearly do need to be willing to trust yourselves. You actually have, intelligence is distributed equally all over the world. You have just as good innovation as anywhere else in the world, and you need to be willing to take those risks and embrace that.
I spoke to a Kiwi investor a few weeks ago, and he said that he'd made a lot of money from his Kiwi-born company, and he'd tried to come to Australia to sell, and he'd been unsuccessful. So he went to the UK, where he got a lot of success early, then came back to Australia and did really well here. There's a bit of a thing. Yeah, it's true. Questions?
At the back.
Had to be up the back, didn't it? Wait for the microphone to come around to you.
He's walked all that way now.
Sharon's going to get the camera as well. We'll just edit this bit out. All right, Simon, sing for us.
Okay.
This is Simon Burke. He's one of our mentors here at Tyro, actually.
Hey, Simon.
So I've been trying to think the best way of structuring this question. Cyber security is predominantly a business-to-business model, isn't it? And I say that because at the moment, the average punter on the street doesn't get it. This audience, we're all sort of aware of the threats, but the average person on the street who is not a technologist, who is going about their normal day and doing normal things, isn't anywhere near it.
So now what's the question?
So I think I'm assuming that the question is, cyber is a business-to-business proposition.
No, I don't.
And will it ever go B2C?
I don't buy it. The mission of successful security is to deliver security without the user feeling like they're having to go through a process involving security, right? In the end, successful security is about users, humans, getting what they need without needing to know anything about how the security works. If it intrudes into the user's experience, you're failing. So I'm not sure I accept the presentation that it's all about business to business. Maybe we're quibbling. It's all about business to consumer, because when you're bolting security into the infrastructure, or ideally building it in from the ground up, then yes, you're doing that in the infrastructure, in the back of the system. But by the time it reaches the user, the user wants a one-click experience. I continue to be impressed by PayPal. I sit there on my mobile on a dodgy 3G connection on a train and successfully buy stuff with only one click. And I personally understand a lot about how complicated the process they are going through with the random merchant that I just happened to have thought up while I was looking for whatever it was this week, a Bluetooth plug-in for my hi-fi. And actually, I think that's the correct outcome. So yes, you can say that that's a business-to-business process in the sense that the payment processor has been connected with the merchant who I've selected. But of course, actually, as a consumer, the point is I get a secure transaction, the merchant gets paid, etc. But actually, there's huge amounts of security impacting me as a consumer. I just don't know about it. And I think that's the definition of a successful security deliverable. So, gentlemen at the front.
Kyle.
Yeah, hi. Quick question for you, more on the entrepreneurial side. So many entrepreneurs you find when it comes to funding are hesitant to relinquish control. So I'm just curious to hear from you kind of how did you convince yourself to do the deal? And has your mindset or your perception of that changed now that you're on the other side of the desk?
Can I ask Kyle where he's coming from with that question? Have you got a startup?
Nope. Just interested in irrational investor behavior.
Okay, so I think that it's a characteristic of entrepreneurs that they have a faulty risk judgment. Okay, that is actually for me. I'm speaking as like, hi, I'm Alex. I'm an entrepreneur, and actually, I think that the reason that I've been able to be successful as an entrepreneur is because I inadequately judge the risks associated with the decisions that I make, and it turns out that that's fine, because what you need to do is take irrational risks, and sometimes they pay off, and sometimes they don't. I really actually didn't spend a lot of time worrying about loss of control in my business because I'm a narcissistic psychopath. I believe that I can be successful regardless of other obstacles in my path. And then I just go ahead and find a way to plow through and get the results that I'm looking for, regardless of whatever those obstacles turn out to be. Now, that isn't necessarily meeting your expectations about how I should, obsess about whether I've got 49 or 51%. Because I remember what I said earlier. I think that if you're playing the game well, it actually doesn't matter. If you ever have a vote where you count the shares, you've failed already. And the way you failed is that the whole point of the board is that you keep everybody on side. Everybody's trying to pull in the same direction. You want to have people in the room who believe in you. Now, by the way, I don't want you to think that I didn't screw up comprehensively on many occasions. I will give you an example. This is going to get broadcast on the interwebs, presumably.
Yeah.
I stayed in a hotel in New York. Actually, it was the very first W hotel, and I got very drunk on whiskey on my own. And very late one night, I went back to my room and I sent my chairman an ill-advised email in which I told him what I thought. And this probably wasn't my greatest decision. And the following day, the guy basically decided to stage a coup and try and depose me, because it turned out that for years he'd been harbouring grudges, and finally I'd given him the chance to bring it all out and have a go. I nearly lost my job as CEO of my own company, and I was rescued by wiser shareholder board directors who said, no, wait a minute, look, this is the guy who founded the company, he's the leader of the company, he's running the company, maybe you did something stupid, don't be so petty, we'll buy your shares. And the people who the chairman represented were Newbridge Networks, the people who stole 33% of my company, and somebody else bought them out. They said, never mind that he was an idiot and drank scotch and dialed, don't do it, folks, but we'll have that. And they bought them out, and at the very last minute, Newbridge's lawyers managed to insert a clause which is very important, called an anti-embarrassment clause, well named, which said, but if there was an IPO within 6 months of the transaction, the price would go up to compensate, just in case. And there was an IPO within 6 months, and this was, just closed down. And we managed to, get the company onto the market, as you heard. So anyway, interesting story, okay? So, I was a dick, and I did something stupid, and I nearly lost my job, and wiser people in the room, who could have screwed me over completely, said, actually, you're why we invested in the business, because you've always made an effort to communicate with us and show us that you're doing the job as well as you can do it. And, so it kind of didn't matter that I wasn't in majority control of my business, and I don't feel proud that I was a dick. But on the other hand, it could kind of happen to anybody. And the good news was I was doing the rest of my job well enough the rest of the time that actually everybody else who was a bit more rational was willing to say, you know what, we still want him to be in charge. And I got, I was super lucky, right? I got to build my business and get an IPO. And then I was still the CEO of my business, for 28 quarters, which I engraved on my heart, as a public company CEO. That's a fantastic privilege, and I learned a huge amount. So, I think it's very interesting. I think people sweat this stuff a lot, and in the end, it kind of, if it ever really matters whether you're in control, you were never in control.
And I'm sorry, has it changed now that you're on the other side of the desk and how you act?
No, I mean, I don't try and take control of things. I always invest minority positions in my businesses, okay? Always invest minority positions. So I'm never trying to exert control. And although I do very standard things that every investor does, like have some things that the management can't do without asking me, like, take out debt or hire somebody for more than 100 grand or
empty
whatever.
the minibar.
But other than that, no, because it's all about having a relationship with the people that you're working with. It's not about control.
A question over here. Greg.
Hi, Greg Einfeld from Plenty. So in an ideal world, you would identify and mitigate every cybersecurity risk under the sun. For a startup with limited resources, what are the priorities?
Good question. So you mean in terms of your own cybersecurity infrastructure? I think it's probably impossible to answer that question because it depends what kind of business you're in. If you're a bank, there are going to be some things that are more important than others. I would say probably trying to reduce the chances that people make wire transfers for large values without, good evidence that they're the authentic authorized sender would be a good thing. Whereas most of the time it's about relatively mundane stuff to do with staying online. So, websites that stay up are good. Therefore, there's the stuff that isn't even security, about infrastructure, SLAs. It's interesting running a cybersecurity accelerator because guess what? We're a target. Everybody thinks it'd be fun to go and knock us over, wouldn't it? So actually I have a WordPress static website with no, CMS, no database to mess up our SQL injection, just flat as hell, because I want the absolutely lowest profile for people to come and bash at. And we haven't had a DDoS attack yet, but I suppose we might, and then we might have to do something about that. I think most of my answer is just going to be about stuff that you probably don't want to hear. It's about training of people to get them to think about security. It's not about what kind of widgety firewall box you buy. It's not about what gadgetry you have in your network infrastructure. It's just about getting the people in your organization to think about security, understand security. No one's born understanding security, so helping people to understand that. Lots of basic training is really, really the fundamental. And then if people are thinking about security as they build your user experience or architect your apps, hopefully your developers know something about security, but really it's about getting everyone in the organization not to click on those dodgy links and those kinds of things. And actually it's a non-technical answer. So when I think about investing in companies that make security products, I'm going to address different questions, but when it comes to just protecting one's own business, I actually think it's really mostly about getting your people to think about security. Mm-hmm.
What does Plenty do?
We call ourselves a financial GPS, so we pull data in from people's bank accounts, and off the back of that we provide holistic financial advice around what super funds should they be in, are they on track to meet their goals, are they spending according to their budget, how should they invest their money, is their debt structured correctly, and so we answer every financial problem that individuals have. And so to do that, does that mean that they give you their login credentials for their other financial providers? Yeah, they do. So we use an aggregator, Yodlee, in order to do that, and that scares the hell out of me. Good, I think it should. So you're holding as proxy other people's password data in order to enable you to use the APIs and get into their financial information, and so that would come with some responsibility. And so you've got a specific challenge that lots of people don't have about holding people's password information to a very high standard. Absolutely, and we don't hold it ourselves. Yodlee holds that, and I'd like to think that their security is going to be at least as good as ours is, because if, just like lots of people try to hack into into your business. There's probably even more that are trying to hack into Yodlee, given the number of passwords they're holding for people all around the world. But yeah, we do take on that responsibility, and it's something that we are very conscious of.
I like the answer where you delegated it to a third party to do the scary stuff, and then then the next challenge is, well, how will you know whether they're actually any good at that or not? And it's edifying to ask questions and see what you can get them to tell you. So okay, great, thanks.
Alex, you've been very, very generous with your time. Can't believe you flew all the way to Australia just to come to this meeting.
Had to do it. But that's what friends are for.
That's right. Thank you very much for coming. Stay tuned for the next one. It's a really interesting one. Please come and have some more drink and some more food and stay for a bit longer and talk and network. Cheers.